Okay. The work session for the Annapolis City Council for Thursday, February 19th, 2026 will be called to order at close to 4:30 p.m. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. City Attorney Berger, will you please present the first item on the agenda?
First item on the agenda is ID 3826, which is overview of comprehensive rezoning.
Okay. Before turning it over, I just wanted to share with the council, this is, I think, a very important discussion. So just hope everyone had a chance to read the materials ahead of time, ask their questions. But this is one of those, I think, big picture things that has a big impact that isn't necessarily so obvious because it's not immediate to today. So certainly appreciate everyone being here and appreciate you all being here. Why don't you introduce yourselves, and all three of you, and then dive in.
Sounds good. Thanks for having us. I'm Eric Lashinsky. I'm the Chief of Comprehensive Planning in the Department of Planning and Zoning.
Eric, when you speak, can you go a little closer to the microphone, please?
Hello, my name is Alexis Robinson. I'm a Senior Comprehensive Planner with the Department of Planning and Zoning.
Thank you.
I'm Casey Ortiz with Comprehensive Planning. I'm a comprehensive planner.
Great.
Okay.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. So we are the comprehensive planning team within Planning and Zoning, which has several divisions. So we're that division. Good to meet the folks on the council who I haven't met before. I'm really excited to share this initiative, Zoning Unlocked, with you. That being said, zoning is a very challenging topic to make exciting and engaging. So if your eyes glaze over, I won't hold it against you, but we have a presentation that we think is going to be interesting. And zoning has this kind of unusual honor of being very consequential to the way the city looks and is experienced, and yet is chronically confusing, misunderstood, poorly understood. And so we're trying to help change that. That's a big part of why we're here. I love sharing this image to remind folks of how far the city has evolved in our lifetimes. I wasn't alive when there was a gas station at City Dock, but it's an important reminder that we can change as a city. We can change the city around the goals that we set. And this is interesting also because the service station is probably the only thing in this picture that came after zoning. Everything downtown, for the most part, precedes zoning, all of our older buildings. And so this gas station, not only, it was not only a service station first, but it was actually expanded to include the mechanic bays. So it was an important part of downtown for a long period of time. The presentation is going to be shared in parts, and we're going to have time for questions after each section to try to keep things moving and make sure you have time to ask questions as we go over each topic. So for overview, any guesses to how many zoning districts the city has? This is our zoning map over here. Most of you have probably seen it before. I'll just jump to the answer. We have 32, and that's a lot for a city that's only 8 square miles. We actually have one zone that's not even on the map. It's the open space zone that was created in 2005 that was never put to use. That's something we've come across in the last year. And it's interesting to look at how this zoning map has evolved in just the last 40 years. We've essentially doubled the number of zoning districts in the city without really doubling the size of the city. So you can see 85, 17 zoning districts, 1998, 28 zoning districts, and 2026 we have 32. And, you know, we're going to go into some detail about the zoning map, but one way of thinking about the colors on this map, they all represent different types of districts where certain land uses are allowed or not allowed, and certain kinds of densities are allowed or not allowed. and the standards that guide what kind of buildings get developed in the city. And so this is just one example. If you look at Inner West Street over that same period of time, 1985, we had 3 zones for that area, and today we have about 6 zones. The green area is our mixed-use zoning district that was really purposefully created for that Inner West Street corridor to enliven it, to basically activate an area that had some vacancy and to bring back local businesses and some residents. And it's been pretty successful for the most part from my perspective, but it's still flanked by a number of zones that have not been as successful in getting the outcomes that they were created to have. Now, most of what we're promoting here is in our comprehensive plan. This is the document that was adopted by the City Council in 2024 in July, and it's something we do every 10 years, and it really sets a vision for the city. And this one had been in the works for several years, going through COVID, and the outcome has a number of goals that really tell you what kind of city we want to be. And this is a summary of them here on the right. Housing, neighborhood preservation, most of them speak for themselves. I think inclusive economic growth, one way to think about that is how easy is it for somebody to open a business here? Do we have a zoning map and zoning regulations that are too complicated to understand that somebody who's new to opening a business has a hard time doing that here? And in which case, somebody who's maybe more capitalized or has more experience has an edge on the next person. But in general, the theme is we want city development to promote the kind of things that Annapolis has done well in the past. When you think about what draws people to Annapolis, it's images like this. I mean, this is a spread from the comprehensive plan that highlighted the great variety of housing types that exist in the city that really have added character and quality to the city and really made it sort of accommodating for a wide variety of households. But the irony is that most of these buildings are not permitted by our current zoning map, zoning regulations. So over time, that zoning map changed to address various needs that may, at the time, seem to make sense, and then as time passes, make less sense.
Mr. Lashinsky, do you want us to hold questions until the end?
Yeah,
or-
actually, I'm almost done with this section, and then,
Okay.
yeah. So ultimately, what we're trying to do with Zoning Unlocked is create a zoning map and zoning regulations that are more intuitive, better address city goals and needs, and provide greater consistency between the future land use map and the zoning map. And what we mean by that is we have a future land use map in the comprehensive plan. It's the most important exhibit in that comprehensive plan. And it really shows kind of the highest and best use of the city's limited land base. And it's pretty straightforward. It doesn't have a variety of residential zones. It basically shows one residential area in yellow, and it's mostly what we have today. But the big themes in this future land use map are, you can see the bands of green that we've never showed on a future land use map in the past, that are parks and conservation areas or places that should be conserved. And then in red, these are all our major corridors where in the past we had land uses defined by whether this is commercial or office use. Red is now symbolizing mixed use, meaning there are compatible uses that should be situated next to each other, and we can be more efficient in how we develop the city so that, particularly on our major corridors where there's transit and services, developing in a mixed-use way is more efficient and strategic. And it's interesting to see, while our zoning map does not look like our future land use map today, Charlottesville, Virginia is sort of working in a parallel trajectory to us, and it's a similar sized city. shares a lot of dynamics with us. They completed a comprehensive plan and then moved swiftly into a zoning update and now have a zoning map that really does reflect their future land use map. So that's just an example I wanted to share. But before we go into the sort of schedule of this way we're approaching this project, I guess this would be a good time for questions.
Great. Alderman Smith-Brown.
Hello, thank you for coming. Always appreciate that, and to the others too. Thank you for serving our city. The questions that I have here is you talked about what draws people to Annapolis, and we all have our own personal backgrounds and stories. I think it's crucial or important for us to share those, especially for those who don't know. And so I was going to ask you, Eric, if you don't mind, whether it is people that see you as ill-intentioned, wanting development in our city, or even for those who are not aware of who you are. Can you share with us your backgrounds, what led you here to the city, and really, why are you staying here? What is keeping you here? What's the vision that you may have, the outlook that you see here?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I was born here, so I didn't have a choice, but I'm happy. I'm proud to. There are a few places I'd rather be from. Candidly, I chose to come back here. I guess that's the important part. I chose to come back here, and I like the scale of Annapolis. It's a little Goldilocks, I guess. It's not too big, not too small. But one thing that as a planner here, I have a different perspective. Maybe when I was growing up and not a licensed city planner, and the thing that has sort of drawn me the challenge of this work is that over the last 60, 75 years, the city really got away from the things that made it, desirable, identifiable as a unique city. The sort of suburban age, the age of the car. We got rid of all of our trains and designed everything around the car. And so that idea of building back the fabric of the city that made it a walkable place where you were close to things that you needed and you didn't have to jump in your car to drive everywhere. That's, to me, that's the kind of city I want to live in. I've lived in those places before, so that's what really kind of drives me the most, I guess. Do you want to hear from the rest of the team here?
Sure. Because I've heard your story, and I think it's more elaborate than what you're sharing here, and I think it's important because you've done this for a large portion of your life, and you served communities that needed it the most. And so I think it's just important as we look at and hear from your guidance, which you helped to really formulate this 2040 comprehensive plan, that you tie that in so that those who are really concerned that this plan is meant to help developers and push out those who can't afford to live here. That's not really what the purpose is from your perspective and what you've shared. So I just wanted to draw that out.
Everything that we want to share, everything that we want to share is we feel is sensible. It's things that we should be thinking about, and it's things that would really promote what people consider to be the strong suits of Annapolis, I would say.
Hello again. Well, I must apologize first to say that I was not born in Annapolis.
Nothing to apologize for.
But I am born, raised, and stayed in the state of Maryland. I've grown up here and visited Annapolis often. I consider it part of my own community. Having been a part of many communities within the state of Maryland, I think I have a good foundation in what community development from the ground up can look like. With my background in urban planning, it focuses mostly on community development that is grassroots and community-led. And I am here in Annapolis now because where else in a place that has a great background of being built early and with the contributions of the community, and has a very active and thriving citizenship to back whatever development in future Annapolis will have.
Hey there, I'm Casey. I'm not originally from here as well, Maryland, but I've kind of been all over the place in Maryland. I live actually just outside the city because I can't afford to live in the city. Sorry about that, guys. But You know, I've kind of worked here my entire career. I've worked here for about 5 years now, and me and Eric worked on the comp plan for a really long time. I think what's guided a lot of our work is, you know, Eric having the experience of having been knowing Annapolis when it was previously what it was like in the 70s, 80s, and I'm here seeing it in the 20s where like so much is different. There wasn't parole didn't exist back then, and a lot of what guides our principles is, you know, wanting to make Annapolis a lot more affordable. And to your point about is anybody else influencing us? This really came from, you know, comp plan was adopted. Something that comes in part with comp plan adoptions is rezoning. And there's pretty much like no developer in our ear like, hey, you guys should do this. This is like us trying to do the right thing and kind of leading into that like 4-step approach of why we're taking a really long time with a lot of the work we're doing is that we're really just trying to do everything the right way and reach out to people.
Yeah, so,
Alderman Huntley?
Thanks. I had a different question. Did you have something more to respond to Alderman Smith-Brown? Thanks. So I love this slide of making Annapolis more Annapolis. That's exactly what I say. My question to you, because you brought up this great point that like so much of what so many of us love about Annapolis, and I've had this conversation I think with you, Alderman Thorpe, is from before we had all these restrictions. And I should be very clear. When I talk about zoning, I'm not talking about historic preservation standards. I'm talking about zoning here. But so much of what we love was built before we had all these restrictions. So if the goal is to, you said, I wrote down promote what we've done well in the past. If the goal is to do that, can you make the case to me why it is more effective to have different restrictions than the restrictions that have caused all the harm, rather than to have just plain fewer restrictions?
well, I mean, I would say that the city has changed dramatically since the time when we didn't have a zoning code. We were about a tenth the size of the city. I mean, the city has grown kind of outward, and an interesting map, you know, in a comprehensive plan shows how the city has grown. In 1951, you know, saw that huge increase. So that, and we're dealing with dynamics today that didn't exist back then, you know, climate change and the housing shortage, and people have attachments to places in a way they haven't maybe had in the past, or have new emotional connections to places. So we're trying to navigate a terrain that has changed dramatically and be sensitive to a variety of perspectives. To say that there needs to be some guidance for sure for what gets built here, and to be kind of, we take our job seriously as almost stewards of this place, and you know, to make sure that it grows in a sensible, harmonious way, and to not have those kinds of guidelines would really prevent us from kind of maintaining what people have come to expect in Annapolis. So I think it's a matter of just calibrating them the right way, but they certainly need to be there. I think, to me, I mean, one of the things I chronically find that people don't understand just how much work goes into making Annapolis look the way it does. You know, the things that we appreciate. It is a very time-consuming, challenging job. I mean, when people think about permitting, and you know, it's typically about, well, how long does it take to get a permit? And so, but there is definitely some value to sort of making sure you make good decisions. So, but it's not to say we can't improve permitting, but it needs to, I think we need to basically have some sense of what we want to protect, what we want to change, you know. So.
Can I ask one other?
Sure, go ahead.
So I said that point of I make a distinction between historic preservation rules and zoning. In the context of how you're talking about zoning today, could you tell me how it's different than historic preservation? Because they're different in my mind, but I'm not sure I could give you a definition.
Well, they're very different. I would say zoning, well, one is a subset of the other. I think that's maybe the best way to think about it. Historic preservation We have a historic district overlay zone on that zoning. It's not really visible on that zoning map, but the entire historic district is governed by that historic district overlay zone, which supersedes the zoning. I mean, it guides the look of the exterior of the buildings to make sure that they are compatible with the historic character that's there. They don't guide what's happened inside the building. And so that's the primary distinction. The zoning typically is focused on what's happening inside the building. What are the uses inside the building? And what does the exterior look like? What's its relationship to the public space around the streetscape? It goes into, it could go into great detail, but the bare minimum is what kind of uses are allowed in that space, that property, and how does it relate to adjacent properties? And, you know, we're looking at, you'll see these future phases, Alexis is going to talk about in a second, form-based standards. I mean, that's a way of getting at the kinds of things that are in our historic district overlay, but aren't about preserving something of the past, or about creating character for today. I mean, it's similar types of standards in the way that they're written, but aimed at a different outcome, I would say. So,
Just have a brief question on the a couple slides below where you have the picture of the many houses or homes. Clarifying question: are all of them multifamily? Like that's
yes, they
okay.
are. Yeah, I should have mentioned that. They're all multifamily, duplex or more.
Even on the left side, the top row, those look like single-family homes, but they're duplexes or
That's
something
right.
more.
Yeah, and that's a point we frequently reinforced. A lot of single-family homes in the city, you may have to count the mailboxes or the
Right.
electric meters to know if there's actually multiple units inside.
A lot of these certainly demonstrate why you can have duplex and triplex without changing the character of a residential neighborhood.
Yeah.
Were there any other questions before we move on? Okay. If you can continue your presentation, please.
Okay.
So as Casey and Eric mentioned, following the comprehensive plan, we have moved into updating the zoning code for zoning unlocked. This process started in 2024 with some text amendments to the planning district, plan development district, and with work on the Tyler Avenue Complete Community Overlay District, which I'll give more information about. We're currently in the second phase, which focuses on assessing and analyzing our current zoning districts, as well as utilizing the open space zoning district. We anticipate that this will go on until late spring or early summer of this year. And following that will be more focused work with a consultant on form-based standards for mixed-use zones as well as residential zones to help clarify and streamline those zoning districts. Next slide, please. So with the Tyler Avenue Complete Community Overlay District, this was a project through 2025 where we looked at Tyler Avenue from Bay Ridge to Forest Drive to assess how this neighborhood that is centrally located to a lot of amenities could increase the density without disrupting the character of the community. This picture on the right was an example for visualization purposes that we use with the community to demonstrate how you can increase density without it being imposing or towering. This image actually has a few different styles of homes with multifamily mixed in, but the recommendations that were adopted as a part of this included modifying how property owners could increase the density on their property with multiple units or smaller units on their property, as well as increasing the the safety and community feel on the street. Currently, Department of Public Works is working on installing a center line on the street as well as a parking lane, so that they can slow down traffic, create a better environment for pedestrians and cyclists, as well as working with the police department on installing a speed camera to really manage speeds, because that was a really big concern for the community throughout this process.
And I would just add that, I think we all saw the value in the engagement we had with Tyler Avenue residents during this process. Over several meetings, we were able to refine the guidance, and I think of it as a success so far. We haven't seen any new development there yet, but a lot of the residents were really pleased with the outcome. So we kind of want to build on that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Eric. What I meant to point out also with the timeline in the previous slide, you see that it's going to take us like 3 years to go through all of this, and that's so that we can engage multiple stakeholders in the community, do multiple meetings and exhibits to thoroughly demonstrate, as well as take in feedback and make it part of the process. So within this phase 2, as you can see, we have been meeting with the Planning Commission regularly. That's where we do our updates for this process. We are currently in a stage of expanding the engagement and the audience for this project. So we will now be presenting to you all as stakeholders and influence in this project, meeting with the Historic Preservation Commission, as well as doing public open house and workshops later in March. Then we'll follow into reiterating that plan and coming up with final recommendations later in the spring. And so now I'll get into the open space zoning. This is probably the highlight, the best part of this presentation, if I might say so myself. One of the big priorities that staff went into for this process was to find a way to preserve our open space, whether it be active and passive recreation or just environmental resources within the city. Because that is not currently reflected in the zoning map. With the intentions of creating an open space zoning district, it was discovered that there already is an open space zoning district. And so since it has not been utilized, this is a perfect opportunity to make that change. And we are looking to incorporate existing and future parks into this, as well as existing and future conservation easements, cemeteries, and public school properties that are currently managed by the city as parks, to create a connected open space or district in the city. Some highlights here concerning the pieces that will be connected to public schools. This will require engagement with Anne Arundel County Public Schools to update any agreements that the city has with them as far as maintenance goes, especially when we get into changing what uses or standards may be associated with the zoning district. We want to include this space because they are connected and an asset for our communities, and this really helps to pull it together by including the Bates Athletic Complex and Germantown Park. And so this is a comparison of what our current zoning map looks like as to what it would look like with more parcels included into the open space district. As you can see on the left, there is nothing that tells you where Truxton Park may be, where the St. Anne Cemetery may be, where anything that may be more recreational or of value in that aspect to the city. versus on the right, where you can see a lot of conservation easements that have been a part of planned developments, as well as valuable park amenities to be preserved and, limited in what uses they could be. Because the idea of Truxton Park being zoned for residential, I don't think anybody wants to see that turn into a residential development, seeing how valuable it is as open space for all the communities within the city.
And I just would reinforce that a lot of these sites are dedicated parkland or locked into conservation easement. So they, in a practical level, they couldn't be developed, but we'll get into, it's just one other aspect of the confusing nature of our zoning map, where it sort of implies opportunities that don't exist, and so I think that's the clarity that we're looking for in the zoning map.
And so just for the technical purposes, the open space district changes will include language changes within the zoning code to include conservation easements and update the definition of open space, new bulk regulations and development restrictions, and additional or changes to the uses that are allowed, additional terms and definitions for things that are not currently in our zoning code, such as for cemeteries and active and passive recreation, and new standards for what active recreation uses are. And secondary uses that could be included in those recreational spaces. Any questions?
Alderwoman Carmen O'Neill.
Thank you very much. So I had 3 phone calls and an email in regards to the slide that talks about the environmental enhancement versus recreational enhancements. Yes, because you highlight environmental enhancements in 2 areas, one in Wardour and one in Emerald Heights, that are currently Wardour, they're either privately owned or community owned, and in Emerald Heights, they're community owned. We had this discussion when we were talking about the comprehensive plan, and people were going ballistic saying, you can't talk about that, please don't include that in your plan. Can you talk about why they're still included in the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So the map on the left, it's from the comprehensive plan. It shows in bright green the areas that should be conserved. Most of them are not easily developable or should not be developed. There's steep slopes. They're places that are close to creeks. And we actually had a lot of questions about that during the comprehensive plan process, because some of those, they're not the ones that you're talking about, but in some cases they were parking lots that are like next to a creek. And, the whole intent was, well, in the future, that parking lot, if it's not needed or, if there's value in actually making it more green, making it something as when water runs off into the creek, it's not polluted. But everything in bright green, those are just recommendations for places that don't make sense to develop, essentially. And I think what you're referencing, nothing changes with their zoning today. What we're highlighting on the right is all the sites over 2 acres. That's a really key distinction here. A lot of smaller conservation areas in the city would create a speckled map that we think would be more confusing. That 2 acre threshold is important. But when we did the public water access plan, we had a lot of questions about the Admiral Heights and the Wardour sites. And so those were questions about whether the city was going to somehow force public use of these privately owned sites. And we were very clear at that point that the city had no intention of doing that. Those were held in homeowners association deeds and so forth. So this is completely unrelated to that. And we settled that confusion in the public water access plan, in my view. And this is really just about putting the properties that over 2 acres that are city parkland or already in conservation easement into a zoning layer that makes sense for them to be more clear.
Their first read, this was causing them flashback
Yeah, I can understand that.
and worry. So
Yeah.
I promised I would ask, so.
Understood.
So they don't have to worry about
Right.
us coming in and trying to do anything on these
No,
lots.
and to be honest, I mean, those types of sites that are already conserved within community HOA communities are less. I would say they're less relevant to this because the HOA restrictions typically supersede a lot of our zoning restrictions. So we have a couple of the newer conservation easements on this map on the right, the Parkside Preserve and the Mask Farm. I mean, those are major conservation acquisitions for the city that we want to promote.
Thank you.
Alderman Smith Brown?
All right, thanks, Eric. So then what exactly would the environmental enhancement be? Are we talking about going there and cleaning up and planting trees? Like what exactly are we doing in this space that we should not or most likely would not be appealing for development?
Well, it's case by case. The whole idea behind identifying properties for environmental enhancement is to give us a guide for places that either should be put into a conservation easement if they aren't already, or give community members, in some cases, some guidance, say, hey, this place in our neighborhood that we already appreciate as a natural area, perhaps it's worthwhile to clean it up, to create a trail or make it more usable for passive use. But clean up the invasive vegetation, the vines that might be killing the trees. I mean, it's a guide. It's really, that's basically the intent.
Also, with the future land use, it's like a guidance from the state that they ask us to do. So it's not binding in any kind of way. It's just something that informs this stuff. So like in that map on the left, it's from the future land use, but none of it's binding. The zoning, everything you see on that right map is what we're proposing would be put into that open space zone. So even though they're side by side, everything in that left map, when in regards to residential enhancements and recreational enhancements, it just so happened to be in the comp plan, and it's what the state asked for, because they asked for like this parcel, how do you break it down so they can put it in their data set.
They refer to it as sensitive areas.
So then are you encouraging the council and the environmental committee, Rob, and the other members to look into funding projects in these spaces?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's-
Absolutely.
Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's a great find on the open space zone. I wasn't aware of that, but it's something I've long been on my radar, is trying to figure out ways to actually ensure that our parks will remain protected as parks and community space. And I think that sounds like that'll be a good mechanism to use. I was also thinking to myself, cemeteries, from a planning perspective, are a huge waste of space. Just as a non-religious atheist, I'm saying that. But with all due respect, from just a zoning perspective, it's not a good use of space. But I think it opens up idea. If we can designate those cemeteries as open space, it could potentially allow them to be utilized for more purposes, recreational purposes, potentially stormwater, that kind of thing.
You want to speak to that? Or? I do want to clarify. I mean, the intention of putting cemeteries in this open space zone is really just to clarify that their future use is pretty much locked in. And, we have no intention of changing their primary use as burial grounds. There are examples in other places we've seen where cemeteries, to raise revenue, for example, do events, but that stuff would be allowed within the open space zoning guidelines. So I mean, it wouldn't preclude them from doing, but we certainly we want to create a zone that is respectful of what the cemetery is doing today and not change that use. So we actually will probably be meeting with some of the cemeteries just to reassure them that this is not about encouraging active uses per se that might be conflicting with their primary use.
Well, I mean, I don't think,
Yeah.
I'm certainly not saying that your plan was to completely repurpose cemeteries and remove them, but I think it should be a good thing to pursue as far as trying to enable other uses, right? There are some open spaces left in cemeteries. It may make sense in some cases as people change how they're dealing with their loved ones who pass away, is to give the owners of the cemeteries other options as far as again, perhaps put it in some kind of community amenity or environmental amenity, something along those lines. I don't think that's anything too drastic. A number of jurisdictions, based on some of my research, are moving in that direction for some of these cemeteries. But in any case, my main point to get back to is I also just want to lend my support on the environmental enhancement area. We talked a lot about that in environmental matters during the crafting of the comp plan. And I think those areas would certainly be well suited to receiving such an open space designation. But I do think one of the things that I don't think quite ended up making it into the final comp plan, and I would still like to see this inclusion, is to get, as we move to open up and reduce, hopefully, reduce some of our parking requirements. I think these big grocery stores with these huge asphalt lots, I think we do want to look towards, some of us anyway, to opening those up to other uses. But I think, for example, putting an environmental enhancement area on a portion of those parking lots would be beneficial from a planning perspective to make sure that during any kind of future redevelopment or repurposing of those lots, that a portion of them do get set aside with the intent of, true to its name, enhancing the environment, right, as far as installing stormwater management, because most of those big grocery stores have zero stormwater management because they've, same thing with apartment complexes, because they just predate our laws, our regs. And so I think it is important to set aside space where we can do some of those stormwater, tree expansion activities. And just one other thing on the environmental enhancement area, I would suggest perhaps looking at, and maybe you've done this, but comparing it with some of the topographical data to look for the drainage areas, because one of the things I've noticed in my day job is the areas that have, in communities, the areas that often have the most drainage concerns are when people come in and try to build on these lots that have traditionally been unbuildable. But now, because we're trying to build housing everywhere, they build housing on these drainage areas and it becomes an issue. They get flooded, they get a lot of erosion. And so I think there's a benefit to identifying those drainage areas and designating them as open space proactively. Because in the end, the drainage serves the stormwater management for the community. And there's a reason why they weren't built on for the past 100 years.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, you want to continue?
Yeah. Okay.
So I just want to point out one thing before we get into zoning consolidation. We mentioned earlier there's 32 zoning districts. We whittled down everything we're talking about in consolidation to immediate recommendations. A lot of the zones that aren't in what we talk about today, we're most likely talking about in future phases of the rezoning. And we can, if you guys have questions about those, we can answer them later. But what is zoning consolidation? It refers to recommendations to simplify the zoning map by reducing the total number of zoning districts. Most of the work we want to do is to reduce the total amount of zoning districts within the existing ones. And within that, we want to update the zones. We want to update a lot of what's in those zoning districts to address our current goals. By simplifying the zoning map, we basically make it easier for people to open a business, improve their home, or build new homes within the city of Annapolis. A lot of what informed these recommendations within the city was that they were inconsistent with the comp plan, which you saw with the future land use. They're redundant, outdated, underutilized. And there's community-supported changes. A lot of that is what informed why we picked what we did immediately and why we're not focusing on others from the jump. So in these immediate recommendations, we're looking at about 8. We've whittled it down a lot to these, but we're looking at R1A, single-family residence, R1B, single-family residence, R3R, general residence neighborhood revitalization, BR, business revitalization, B3CD, general commercial corridor design, C1A, special conservation residence, and C2P, conservation professional office. And the reason why I wanted to make sure you guys knew the names, not just the code for it, is because there's a little bit of context behind. There's a reason it's named like that. It's not just, even though R1A and R1B have the same name, they do accomplish different things, and it's important to understand that there is intent behind each of the names.
We're going to go into detail on each one, so
we'll get more into this as we go through each of the zones, but these are the preliminary recommendations that we got to by speaking with pretty much our entire planning department, the Planning Commission, and Historic Preservation Commission, just so that you all know that these recommendations didn't just come from the 3 of us, that this has been a pretty collaborative effort, and we've talked to a lot of people over a lot of months, and we have whittled down a lot to just what you're seeing today.
and it's not over yet. So we're going to have the public outreach phase and really try to see where the public stands on this, as well as your input, of course.
So for R1A, we're talking about consolidating R1A strictly into R1, except for in one location, it's being changed into open space, and that's where, because of the mosque farm conservation easement. But for the most part, what guides this is we want to preserve neighborhood preservation, stewardship of environmental assets, and general consistency with the comp plan. By going from R1A to R1, we're not increasing density. It's pretty much going from single-family housing to single-family housing. There's no big change. This one shows the development pattern within the Wardour community in Hunt Meadow. On the left, you see about 1.7 units per acre with a medium lot size of 22,000 square feet. Hunt Meadow, you get around 3.1 units per acre with an average lot size of 12,000 square feet, and that's well within what's allowed within the R1. I do want to point out that even with changing them in Hunt Meadow and Wardour, there are homeowners associations, and with Wardour, by changing from R1A to R1, they have smaller lot sizes, but most of this area is within the critical area. So it makes development in this area very difficult, and there are tons of reviews that have to occur. By changing from R1A to R1, it doesn't get rid of that. It's still within the critical area, and there's still homeowners associations.
And I would just add, for those who might be watching from home and live in these communities, the communities that are zoned as R1 today in the city include Heritage, Admiral Heights, portions of Murray Hill, and
the adjacent neighborhood to it.
Right, and Fairfax Road. So these are the kinds of community, that's the kind of single-family detached home character that is the R1 that we think is conducive to what's in R1A today.
R1B, this one gets very messy very quickly, but we're proposing changing a lot of the R1B into either R1, R2, R3, and open space. It really depends strictly on the development pattern. There's labels for each of them to show you what it's going into, and we can get into that later. but that we're really, it's based off of neighborhood preservation, continued stewardship of environmental assets, and just consistency with the comp plan. And you can see here on the left, Parkside Preserve is about 12.5 units per acre, with the average lot size being 2,400. This is one we talked about changing from R1B into R3. And Kingsport on the right, 5.4 units per acre, with the average lot size being 6,800 square feet. We talked about this one being R2. R3R, we talked about consolidating this district into R3 and MX. The image on the bottom left corner kind of shows where Caraway Lane is. That's kind of the dividing line for where the R3 would occur, and then everything to the east of that would be changed into MX. There is no substantial differences between the R3R and R3 aside from more reviews with staff, and MX would introduce a few more residential and commercial uses to the area.
That picture on the bottom, that's the access road to Maryland Hall and Bates Middle School, for those who might not recognize it. So that development on either side of that road is Caraway Lane.
Here on B3CD, we're talking about consolidating from B3CD into MX. I get into it in the next slide, but we're talking about introducing a lot of residential uses to this area. There's a lot of community support to a lot of the changes that we have here. And that, if you can go to the next one.
Yeah.
These are some of the use differences between MX, B3CD, and BR. By consolidating B3CD and BR into the MX zoning district, you introduce so much more residential uses to these districts. You get a lot of dwellings above non-residential uses. You get multifamily introduced into B3CD along that West Street corridor. And you would make the Toyota and the Hyundai non-conforming. We talked internally with our staff. They apparently have like a 50-year lease. So just because the zoning changes doesn't mean that their lease is now invalid. They'd be there for a long time. But because it's non-conforming, whenever that lease runs up, it's a lot more appealing to the landowner to want to, if they would rather redevelop that into housing, that this would now be an option for them.
And this, when we talk about community-supported change, Casey mentioned that. I just want to reinforce that this is a site that we hear repeatedly from neighbors that would love to imagine a future when this site is not car dealership lots. And we, as planners, cannot predict when that will happen, but we can help create some incentive for the change to happen. And we've really tried to work with the neighboring communities on this vision.
And we didn't include a slide on it, but for the BR changing into MX, that's along Clay Street near the Stanton Center. That would be changing from BR into MX. It's a lot of community supported changes. I believe you guys even had to deal with legislation that had to deal with the height in the area. There's a lot of kind of reiterating again, just introducing a lot more residential uses to that area. You kind of are able to increase the density.
I want to pause right here because the next couple slides relate to same theme for zoning consolidation, but they relate to the downtown area. So it's a little bit different. It's a shift in focus.
Can you go back a couple slides to the R1B zoning districts? I just want to make sure I was understanding, was looking at it. This is the Parkside Preserve on the left, Kingsport on the right.
That's right.
The R1B zone would allow for what average lot size or what minimum lot size?
You gotta go back one.
Yeah. So today, the R1B is designed for approximately 3 units per acre, pretty low density. And so, Parkside Preserve doesn't really even meet that, but it was done as a planned development. And so it was able to kind of get beyond that. And it may have had some previous zoning that was not R1B, so it kind of was maybe split zone, but.
So if it's if the R1B zone would be 3 units per acre, what does that make the average lot size?
About 20, a little under 20,000 acres per, I'm sorry, square feet, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, square feet.
So
Yeah.
I guess what I'm
A
trying to
third
get
of an
at
acre, yeah.
is to the extent that Kingsport and Parkside Preserve are bigger, right,
Yeah.
than the lots that they'd be allowed, does that mean that owners of those parcels could subdivide their property to put additional housing?
They have a homeowners association in Parkside Preserve, so they wouldn't be able to just subdivide it's also attached homes, so they couldn't subdivide the homes, but there are also, within the R1B, there's other homes outside of Parkside Preserve that are in that area, and if they wanted to subdivide, they could do that,
So that'd be
theoretically.
permitted non-conforming, correct? Is that,
No, they would not be able to subdivide because of their HOA restrictions, essentially.
that's something the city can't control, so the
Right.
HOA could change the rules to allow it,
HOA
right?
could change the rules to allow for.
Okay, and so if the HOA did lift those rules, they could subdivide?
To be consistent with the base zoning, yeah, that's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
And so I assume the same thing would apply for, I was trying not to refer to Hunt Meadow, but the same thing would apply for the R1A. Essentially, the HOAs have restrictions, but if the HOAs remove those restrictions, then homeowners from Waldor or Hunt Meadow could subdivide.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different with Hunt Meadow and these ones that we're proposing to go to R1, because that is still very low density. I think each unit is on, I want to say, is it 7,000 or 10,000 square foot per lot? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So R1, minimum lot size, 7,000 square feet. So, yeah, which is still a pretty large lot. So that would, if either Hunt Meadow or Wardor wanted to change their HOA restrictions and allow for multiple units on a lot, they would be limited to 7,000 square foot lots.
Not trying to pass judgment, just trying to understand it.
Yeah.
So I could articulate it. Alderman Huntley?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question, because I feel like I'm looking at the same numbers and getting a different understanding. What I'm seeing here is that Parkside Preserve, the average lot size is already way smaller than is allowed under R1B. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So if we were to change it from R1B to, let's just say, R2, the average lot size would still be dramatically smaller than is allowed.
That's right.
So you would only be able to subdivide if you had a lot size that's 4 times the current average lot size,
That's right.
even if we changed it to R2.
That's a
right?
great point. Yeah. So R3, just to be clear, the
We're not
average.
talking about R3, right?
Well, that's what our proposed rezoning for Parkside would be R3.
Oh, okay.
Just
Thank you.
because, as you noted, because the existing lot size there today is, it's basically still under construction. So it's a brand new development, 2,400 square feet. That's, yeah, those are very small lots by city standard, by our, city standard here.
I guess I'm just having trouble understanding the slide itself. So Parkside Preserve, Kingsport, that's titled R1B zoning districts. That's existing, but these are proposed to move to a different?
Yeah. The image upper right is an image of Parkside Preserve, one portion of Parkside Preserve. It shows these attached homes, there's some detached homes at Parkside Preserve as well, but you can see the density there. That is more consistent with our R3 zoned areas in the city today, where each unit is about 3,800, the parcel size is about 3,800 square feet, and encourages townhouse development. But the image just below that is from Kingsport, where it says R2, and that pattern in Kingsport is much more similar to other neighborhoods in the city that are zoned as R2. Single-family detached homes, no townhomes, And the minimum lot size is 5,400 square feet in the R2 zoning district. So
How are you able to tell from this slide that the proposal is for the Parkside Preserve to go from R1B to R3? I'm not seeing
You
that.
guys have an out-of-date PowerPoint.
What's that?
The one we're showing today is up to date. You guys have an older one. Sorry about that.
All right, I didn't realize that.
There's labels on this
I think
one.
we added labels to the one on the screen.
Okay.
And then, yeah, sorry.
We changed it like today.
But you know, by basically looking at the parcel layout, we did, you know, that's the analysis we did. We looked at how these neighborhoods were laid out, the parcel size, and came to that, you know, looked at the kind of pattern of development in other neighborhoods that are zoned as R2 or R3 or R1 to really make the fit seem right. So.
Okay. Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, you know, I was surprised by some of these slides. I don't think I quite realized or appreciated with some of the zoning and some of the developments that are out there, that minimum lot size of, would you say, approaching 23,000 feet?
R1A,
That's half an acre. That's
Yeah.
huge for a city.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like you think back, and then I think about, you know, I mean, my ward, by the nature of being on the edge of the city, as opposed to some that are just bounded by water, but like on the edge of the city, we got Parkside Preserve, and it seems odd. You know, it seems like the old development pattern, which is like, all right, we're just going to put new, single family homes, which they did detached on Parkside Preserve, when it really doesn't, again, that doesn't seem to make sense from many standpoints. One, as far as, again, we are a designated growth area in Maryland, smart growth, yada, yada. But I also want to connect it to what Alderman Chandelmeyer presented to us maybe 4 or 5 years ago with the Urban 3 study about, it wasn't about valuation, it was about tax
Land value.
revenue, but also how much, if it's a net, if the properties are a net, essentially user of taxes, or if they actually contribute more than they use. And just oversimplifying it, you know, obviously downtown was the most valuable because it brought in the most tax revenue for the city. But the ones that were most expensive were the ones on kind of the outskirts, the single family homes, particularly the detached single family home. And, you know, it doesn't escape me the irony that those are the most expensive homes, but they also contribute the least amount to the city's coffers. And so, I guess I'm saying all that just from a planning perspective, like, at least from my perspective, I'd be inclined to say, look, if we don't have too many other areas that are not developed, right? I mean, we have Rocky Gorge, which is, I know already has a bit of a record plat, but maybe some other properties here and there. We may annex some property, but again, I think it would make sense to really, in some way, make sure those new opportunities are zoned in a way that's going to make sure, because we want the clustered development. And if you have these prohibitions on having attached homes and lot sizes, then things are going to be spread out and sprawled, and again, cost us more money in the end, and have a greater impact, environmental impact. So I don't know. I know you're focusing, starting on kind of the downtown area, which I get, but I'm eager to see what you propose for, again, like Ward 7 in particular, because we do have a lot of growth opportunities.
That phase 4 of our process, where we look at the form-based standards for residential zones, that's really going to be the opportunity to look at, well, does an existing residential community that doesn't allow for a duplex, would it make sense to do that? And if so, what kind of standards need to be in place to give neighbors some confidence that it's not going to destroy the neighborhood or something, you know? And that's really when we're going to take up that conversation. And so essentially every residential area of the city could be discussed at that point and see, well, where does it make sense? But we're being very deliberate, cautious in our process here to kind of build up towards the things that we think are more complicated. This seems complicated enough, but in our view, this was sort of low-hanging fruit that we still have to make the case and justify it, but we are more confident that if we can put the data and the existing conditions out there, it'll make sense to people, but it's still complicated.
Being conscious of the time, I
Yeah.
want to take questions from Alderman Smith-Brown and then Alderman Huntley, and then let you finish the presentation.
I'll say you answered my question just now. I was just going to grandstand about why restriction on lot sizes are bad.
Wait your turn. I'm kidding. I appreciate that. So I know we talked about this, myself and other committee members in our Rules and City Government Committee with the Urban 3 plan. Appreciate you having some of that information here as well. Now, what I was going to bring up is slides 26, 28, 30, all those descriptions, and I think this was a part of our conversation. That's exactly what we were asking for, if we can make that more user-friendly on the portal, so that when I'm clicking on, or any person is clicking on one of those residential areas, they can see exactly what is planned for this. Like what is R1? And you gave, I think these are great descriptions for the most part. And so if we can make that more accessible for us to do on our own, I think that would be really helpful for many.
Thank you. You know, we were going to mention it towards the end of the presentation in a few slides, but I might as well just say it here.
We're developing like a notification tool so that if anyone who's affected by it, they'll be able to know what their existing zoning is, what we're proposing, and then our justification for it for every single parcel that's impacted throughout the entire city.
It'll be like a map viewer, an online map tool that would have those kind of straightforward descriptions to explain what the thinking is. That's the goal. So.
I think the school system used something like that during redistricting that I think
Right.
people found very helpful.
And I think like all of this stuff is informing a report that our intent is for all the information in this and what we've done and in the future is to inform some kind of report that obviously not everyone's going to read it, but you all are able to read it and understand why we came to the decisions we did, and that all that information is in one spot for someone to read.
Thank you.
Are you saying-
If you don't mind trying to finish the last and no more than 10 minutes, then we can save 5 to 10 minutes for questions before wrapping up at 6 sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. It was the same. Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
So just the last 2 zones we're talking here about in the historic district, and I wanted to separate these out because they're pretty unique. In the 90s, we did the Ward 1 sector study that proposed adding 3 new zoning districts in the downtown area. The C1A was the first one I'm going to talk about. One of the things we heard repeatedly in the comprehensive planning process from longtime downtown residents was this desire to have their neighborhoods back, to have more full-time residents, to have businesses that catered to full-time residents. And what we found is one of the most straightforward ways of doing that is to essentially remove some of the restrictions that are preventing full-time residents from living downtown. And so we addressed short-term rentals in legislation recently. That was a big need. That's certainly a cause for lack of long-term housing and escalating prices. But the other thing is this C1A district, you can see all the pink areas. These are essentially residential areas in the downtown that were deemed, in the 1990s, they were deemed to be nuisance properties. They were not well kept. There was basically a desire to bring back more single-family owner-occupied housing. And so apartments were sort of the boogeyman at the time. And today we have a real housing shortage in the city and escalating housing prices. And if you look at these properties today, I'm just going to skip ahead. I mean, this is a snapshot of the C1A zoning district today. The thing that strikes me as remarkable is you have a number of very large properties that were seen as ones that could only be used for single-family residential. And so some of these are actually multifamily buildings today, and so we would say they're deemed non-conforming with the current zoning. They're not at risk of going away until the property is sold and it's vacant for a year, and then they would essentially lose their ability to be multifamily, and they would have to be single family or some one of the few other uses allowed in the C1A. There's an office building on the bottom row here, law firm office. If that law firm decides to move, sell the building, it couldn't, and it's vacant for a year, it couldn't be that again. And so it would have to be a single family residence most likely. So we're trying to be cognizant of like opportunities, but also ways of updating the code to make some of these properties conforming to the zoning. And so what we recommend with this C1A district is to make most of these C1A properties zoned as C1. Now, C1 is the larger of the residential zones in the downtown area. It's been successful. It guides development in a large portion of Murray Hill, and we think that that zone is more than capable of continuing the character that people associate with the downtown area. It happens to allow for a variety of other housing types, multifamily, duplexes. So we'd like to enable those types of uses to be on the table for some of these properties. And bear in mind, these would also still be in the historic district overlay, which really guides the look of the exterior of these buildings. The second zone I want to highlight is the C2P, recommended at the exact same time in the 90s to protect office properties, essentially. So in the lower left is a set of properties along Franklin Street that were historically across from what used to be the city hospital. So these were medical offices, this block here. Most of those have converted over to residential the last few years. There's a few on Cathedral, where my cursor is on the screen. There are still offices. And then this other group of purple properties is on Duke of Gloucester, Upper Duke of Gloucester, behind Main Street, just down from the Maryland Inn, and a couple on the opposite side of the street. What we're proposing is to make the group of properties along Franklin, lower left here, primarily C1, reflect the residential character that they have today. The properties that are along Cathedral be zoned as P, it's professional office, which reflects their current uses. These properties along Duke of Gloucester would be zoned as C2, which is what we have on Main Street. It allows for residential apartments above commercial or office uses. And then there's one outlier up here in the upper right, or up above. That's a property close to the Naval Academy that historically was a pizza place, Buzzy's Pizza. People have fond memories of. That's this image in the upper right here that is vacant right now. So the bottom row are all the buildings along Franklin. The upper row primarily along Duke of Gloucester, and then this one on by the Naval Academy. This is a summary of what I just went through, but I wanted to highlight one outlier. There was another zone proposed in the 1990s, the C2A. It really only governed a few properties. It was pretty specific. There's one, we looked at this very closely and felt that it has a lot of viability still today, except for one property. And this is around the corner from Hats in the Belfry on Green Street. You can see the image of it below here. It's a property that is residential today. In the past, somebody wanted to make 2 apartments. They couldn't do it because of the zoning. We think making it C1, it means that it could do that in the future. Finally, I'll just tee up something that we're looking at right now that is, even if we were to pass, if you were to pass legislation making these C1A properties C1, and suddenly they can have multifamily units, duplex, et cetera. There's a standard in the C1A zoning district today that requires a unit to be at least 1,800 square feet, essentially. It's a suburban house that within our most dense urban environment in the city. We think that's holding us back from doing the kind of things that the comp plan is recommending. We don't know what that lower unit size should be, but we're looking at what's there today and what is being proposed. And this is just a snapshot on Prince George Street alone. You have 3 properties that are not conforming to that standard. They all have multiple units that are well under 1,800 square feet, and we could not create this today. So that's something we're looking at. We want to be respectful of what makes sense in the neighborhood. But that's essentially, the rest of the presentation is just next steps. And yeah, we're basically out of time, so I think we should probably just ask for questions.
Alderman Savage? Just try to be mindful of time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just stick to one main point. Because I think, so the point was made earlier about, there's some public perception or concern, the developers are pushing this. And look, I admittedly used to demonize developers, but I've really come around and realized we have to, that they are how we get this stuff done, right? But I think we certainly need to make sure they're driven, pointed, and directed in the right way. But related to that is the point I want to just end with for myself, my own comments, are this, that, and I know this is on your mind, but just to emphasize, like, I think for this vision to happen, and this is going to be potentially have some controversy, concern from the public, but to address that, government really needs to keep pace with the infrastructure planning, right? That is how we address the concerns we're going to hear. And I just feel like, so I think when we do the public outreach, I think being very clear and having those plans outlined would be helpful. For example, and I have something I'm working on I need to share with you. We need to have a strong complete streets policy.
A strong what?
Complete streets. So when we're doing this work, at the same time, we're adding the street trees, we are adding the traffic calming, we're expanding the sidewalks, adding the bike lanes, because that is going to directly address those impacts we're hearing from people. And obviously I can't go without also mentioning the transit planning, right? I think this needs to get connected with the transit development plan, but even going further than the transit development plan as far as improving our bus services, the coverage, the frequency, again, with the idea of addressing the impacts and concerns we're going to be hearing about. Because I think that is something that helped the Tyler Avenue, is because I feel like we did tie those together fairly well. Yeah, that's my final comment on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's a great point.
Thank you, Alderman. Any response?
I was just going to say, that's a great point, that by and large, what you're seeing right now from this presentation are recommendations to the extent that there would be new density. It's in places that can support that where there's infrastructure in place, and it's, we're really just trying to make things more consistent with the character that's there today.
Sure, but on the other hand, we also still don't have, the built-out cycling infrastructure.
Right.
So we don't have adequate transit at the moment. Every single route we have except the circulator is failing. It's not meeting the state standards. We have to do better with that infrastructure if we're going to do this. And I want to support this, but I'm just saying we've got to.
Right.
Alderman Huntley, then Brown after that.
Briefly, I agree with you, Alderman Savage. I just want to remind everybody that if we don't build it, it's going to get built somewhere else, and they're going to probably have even worse infrastructure. So, just my take. But my actual question is, sorry if you already said this, but the text amendment to the bulk standards for dwelling units. Later on, I see you have text amendments as coming in through fall 2025. When are we planning on doing that bulk standard amendment?
Well, so not sure. I mean, really,
All right, Monday.
yeah, it really depends on your willingness to advance legislation. I mean, I think Casey had a slide early on. We're here to provide recommendations to the council that you would take action on if it makes sense. That's really our role here. So
I would also say that with those bulk standard changes, there may be discoveries that come with the form-based standards as well that may change what those look like.
Alderman Smith-Brown?
Yes, too, and then I'm done. I actually, to that point, I was going to mention something about legislation. If there's any specific legislation direction you could provide, particularly for our mayor, because I know he does lead when it's coming from a department or what have you, do that as soon as you can so that we can get this rolling and respect getting into the committees that we need them to go to give that thorough review. Secondly, for clarification for whomever may not have gotten that, are you saying that the description for these residential pieces or parcels of land will be provided after you get to that point in the project where you're providing a new app or what have you that you said, the new portal? Or are you saying that that can be done where in this time, in the next months, or however, not to give you all a time frame or line that's your work, et cetera? What were you saying about that? Are you saying it can be done sooner rather than later, or it can't be?
We have a finished draft of it, but we're just going through like final reviews of it. It's just like what exists, what's the zoning today, what are we proposing, and then why we're justifying that choice.
Yeah, so kind of just to speak a little bit more on this slide and answer your question, we anticipate that that tool will be available while we're doing public engagement. And so while we're talking to the community about what these recommendations look like, they'll be able to look up that information. But then after this process, after we've heard from stakeholders, after we've heard from the different boards and commissions, our final recommendations will be in a report. And that's kind of what Casey was talking about at our last break. And that report will be on the project website for people to review what the current zoning districts are, what the recommendations, what changes, what impact areas there will be. So that everyone is fully informed as this goes through the full legislative process.
Okay,
We also plan to have a partnering survey with it so that it's not none of you are bombarded with comments on this, but that there's a way for us to collect everything and have a public log of what is everyone saying.
Is that so? You're saying so you're going to wait until everything's really compiled or together to then share with us, not the current portal that we have, because there is one currently where I can go and we can find out these, but you're going to say, let's hold off a little bit, and so we can provide it all at once. That's what you're implying? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Nutley?
Real quick one, back to that C1 bulk standards. Do you guys have an idea of what would be more appropriate than 1,800? I mean, I used to live across the street from a conservation residence zone, and I think my place was 500 square feet. So is that something you have an answer to now, or no? Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't.
I was in 900 square feet as a starter home with my wife. It was great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we need.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any final comments? All right, seeing none.
Can I just add, can we make one final
I have to
comment?
Go to you to finish up. If it's quick.
Final comment is you can follow our progress on the project website. That is being updated with every meeting that we have with the board and commission. That is also where the tool will be housed, as well as the community survey and all the information for all of our public meetings. You can direct people to that.
And if you can attend our meetings at the end of March, that'd be great.
You can see them on this slide here. Bush Library, March 30th.
Can you make sure that you're in touch with Mitchell, our PIO department, when you have all these things? Because I'm not sure how much we advertise this meeting per se, but I mean, I know you do a lot of meetings, so I'd love for our residents to just continue to be as informed as possible. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I could ask you, that slide's different than the,
I'm calling for you.
sorry,
Yes, go ahead.
that slide's different than the one, if you could just shoot the city council those dates, that'd be
Yes.
great.
We'll send this presentation. This was a slight change. We didn't have these dates at the time, and maybe a few other.
No, yeah, no problem.
Okay. Ms. City Attorney, will please call the next item on the agenda.
The agenda is completed.
Okay. Is there anything else for the good of the order? All right. Hearing nothing, the session is adjourned.